Friends, over the past couple of months, you and I have been driving a hell of a lot of SUVs. I think we've driven practically every SUV Mercedes-Benz manufacturers. We drove the Kia, I think we drove a Hyundai. So many, I am starting to lose count. But you know what we haven't driven in a stupidly long time is the Audi Q7. I'm not even joking about this. The last time you and I drove an Audi Q7 together was 5 or 6, literally one of the first ever episodes of the show back in 2010, where we took a diesel version of the Q7 from the hottest place on record in the lower 48 to the coldest place on record in the lower 48, all on one tank of diesel fuel. If you haven't seen that episode, I highly suggest you check it out. It was fun, and it was definitely old school MotoMan. And with that, today we have the new 2017 Audi Q7, gasoline powered. So while we work on the full first drive review, let's you and I go through a tech review, and let's start where we always start, the engine. Now, before we dive into bullets and numbers here, we need to cover something very important right at the top, and that is your engine choices here in the good old US of A. Basically, you can have anything you want as long as it runs on Bleifrei. If you want Rudolf Diesel's fantastic magical engine, sadly, that is not on offer here in the US. I will let you take a wild guess as to why. You can debate that amongst yourselves in the comments below, and we can have a discussion. But getting back to what we have here is a 3-liter V6. It is supercharged, so we've seen this engine before in other Audis. In this guy's 333 horsepower, which comes in at a relatively high engine speed. 5,500 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 6,500 RPM. The torque, 325 pound-feet, comes in also at a relatively high engine speed for this type of engine. 2,900 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 5,300 RPM. That is connected to kind of like the ubiquitous 8-speed Tiptronic from the Audi folks. So if you're following Audis, this is kind of like a carryover. We've seen it in other parts of the Audi group. But now I think we need to press on and look at some other more, I don't want to say innovative tech in an Audi, but new to the Q7. So like the engine and transmission, there are some carryover bits in the suspension and everything related to driving dynamics. Like, for example, the front suspension is a 5-link unit. The rear suspension is a 5-link unit. The brakes in the front, it is 14.8-inch diameter rotors. In the rear, 13.8-inch diameter rotors. They're vented, of course. But really, the big change comes in the adaptive driver package. I believe that's what they call it. They come up with these fancy names between Mercedes, Audi, BMW, and all these things. But what this one does is it gives you really two things. Number one, it gives you an adaptive air suspension. So the base car rides on steel springs, where this one is fitted with the adaptive air suspension. And that really does two things. The first thing it does, it changes the overall driving dynamics. And we've covered this, God knows how many episodes, where I changed from like a comfort mode to like a sport mode to like the super sport mode. Here, it's basically comfort and dynamic, and then there's an individual mode, like you can put the engine in comfort and the suspension in dynamic if you want. That's kind of what I do when I'm driving around town. Anyway, I digress. So that's what the first part of the adaptive air suspension does. Then, being this is an SUV, it has adjustable ride height. So there is the regular modes, like street modes. Then there's an all-road mode. Now, I know this doesn't have all like the crazy body cladding, so technically this isn't branded an Audi all-road, but it has an all-road mode in the ride height in that it raises the ride height by about 25 mils. But wait, there is more. There is an off-road mode, which raises the ride height by about 60 mils. So that is the adaptive air suspension, but there's one other bit which is kind of new to the Q7, and that is back here, and that is a rear wheel steering system. So I feel like this is kind of becoming in vogue again, because the last time you and I saw rear wheel steering was like Super Hikes 300ZX. Remember the Z32, which I still love and totally want one. If you haven't seen our episode on the Z32, we drove one with like 500 miles on it. Make sure you check it out. Anyway, I digress. Or like, remember the Prelude with four-wheel steering, like back in the late 80s, early 90s? But now there's a resurgence. The last time we drove it was in that new Cadillac CT6. And really the purpose of four-wheel steering in a long vehicle like this is to, in low-speed parking lot maneuvers like this, to make it a little bit easier, quicker steering, but in high-speed maneuvers, make the high speed more stable. Now, I really can't spend a lot of time doing it here because I'm not driving the vehicle in the tech review, so come back for the full first drive review and we'll spend some time dealing with rear-wheel steering in an Audi Q7. Now, look at this vehicle. It's not really meant for people like me that prefer vehicles built in a shed in the southeast of England that leak when it rains, but this is for people who want to have families, who want to be practical and prudent, but fancy at the same time. So let's tend to the business of what this thing really is focused on. Now this is the point of the episode where sadly we have to move away from the stuff that you and I get excited about, car guys and gals, like driving dynamics bits, and talk about the business end of this SUV. So basically the U part less than the V. Now, of course, if you're going to be one of the yummy mommies that buy one of these things, you want one of these gates that open with a magic button. But really there are a couple of things back here that are interesting. Number one, the seats. Now obviously you want to put a lot of people in this thing, and this thing will have, they say 7 people, but the reality is I don't think it'll hold 7 real adults. I think it would be 5 real adults and 7, I think, Martians that are like this big. But those seats back there, you can adjust them with a touch of a button, which I think is, this is like the basic cost of entry in the segment now. You got to be able to have a button, like someone is really too lazy to push the thing down, which actually would be a lot quicker than doing this, but then again, I'm not the kind of person for these things. Number 2, the seats, it's, instead of being like a 60-40 split, it's 35-30, 35 if I have the math correct. And what's unique is you can put the center of the seat down, and thus kind of making like pseudo captain's chairs. Very neat touch. And then there's something I wanted to point out here more than just seats, and that is this little storage area down here that holds the very cool subwoofer and amp and all that kind of stuff with the Bose system. The Bose system is fitted as standard to this vehicle. If you guys remember, back in January I was hired as the spokesman for Bose to release 4 products from CES. This is not one of the products that was there, but it has some of that technology where it has like a 3D surround kind of system in here, and this is where a lot of that electronics are packaged in the car. Very neat little touch. Now, of course, I wouldn't be doing my job correctly if I didn't tell you that for the extra low sum of like $6 grand, you can get a Bang & Olufsen system in this car. But I digress. We also did while we're on Bose, we also did a standalone episode of the Bose 34 speaker, let me repeat, 34 speaker Panerai system in the Cadillac CT6. I know it's coming up a lot in this episode. We did that, and it is now live, so make sure you check out that episode where we just focus on nothing but engineering an audio system into a car. Anyway, I digress. Let's go back here. Now think about this. This is a utility vehicle, right? So at some point you're going to load stuff into it. Well, remember we had that air suspension and it has really 2 functions. Well, guess what? There is a 3rd function, and you could actually raise and lower the ride height of the vehicle based on what you want to like bring and pick up into your vehicle, whether it's a heavy dog or groceries or whatever you get from IKEA. I guess people who drive a vehicle like this probably don't shop at IKEA. Anyway, let's put this aside here and head to the more front end of the business cabin of the Double B. Now we're getting to like the business end of the U in the SUV for us car guys and gals. And like the engine, transmission, some of the driving dynamics, there are some carryover bits from other Audis, like the head-up display, or more importantly, the Audi virtual cockpit. If you saw our TT episode, you know I went on and on and on about the virtual cockpit. Now I think it's a game changer completely for Audi. But there's something different about this application. It's not just contained here. They actually have a screen over here, like in the A3. Yes, I am telling them about the screen, so you can kind of shut up now. So the screen really does 2 things, really points out 2 unique things about the Q7. Really the first time we've seen this on the show. And number one is this new trackpad. We looked in the A3 episode how they first put the trackpad on the scroll wheel, where here now it's this huge application that sits in front of the shifter, and the shifter's kind of weird with the park button here and all. Anyway, I digress. So you got this huge trackpad. Like, for those of you in the post-production world, this is like a professional, like Wacom-sized tablet trackpad. And you've got 8 presets over here, the smart buttons on either side. But the main reason you have this is to control, which is here also at first on the show, is Apple CarPlay in an Audi. So you can see I've got my phone connected here, and basically it gives you the ubiquitous iOS icons over here. Now, if you saw our Mercedes-Benz SL63 episode, it's similar in the way you interact, in that it's got the control through the scroll wheel or voice, and that's it, meaning you can't touch anything here, which I think, coming from this side of the world here, where you're already used to like using your finger to control things, I think that's kind of a mistake. But anyway, that's just one man's opinion. And before we kind of step out and summarize here, I did want to show you the interior to think about and get your input before we get to the full first drive review, because we'll probably have to discuss this in the full first drive review a little bit more than we do here. So with that, let's summarize. So we have looked underneath the hood. We took a brief look at driving dynamics. We looked at the U in SUV, and we even spent some time talking some new like UX tech as well as interior design. So, in summary, what have we got? Well, if I'm being completely honest, the design of the previous generation Q7, I still think is one of the most handsome SUVs out there. This one, I don't think I'm quite on the plantation yet. I need some more time with it in person. So in between our little tech review here and our full first drive review, I am going to leave you guys with a question here, and it's a very simple question. What do you think of the design of this new Q7? Do you like it? Do you not like it? And if you like it, let me know why. If you don't like it, let me know why. And for good measure, let me know what region of the world you live in and what car you currently drive. Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I want to leave you with 2 things. Number 1, make sure you download our fancy new mobile application, which you can download for free from Apple iTunes or Google Play. And number 2, make sure you come back for our full first drive review, where we take a baby buggy, which we are now referring to as Double B, and see how 4-wheel steering affects a long wheelbase, very heavy vehicle. Matter of fact, I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger. You are not going to believe the weight of this vehicle. Until the full first drive review, bis später.